afternoon and welcome everybody to this meeting of the Communities and Neighbourhoods Transitional Committee, which is being held in the Council Chamber at the Town Hall. I have some housekeeping items. Please note that social distancing restrictions and other public health safety measures still apply, so please keep your distance from others. You can see we're all managing to do that today. And remain seated as much as possible during the meeting, and if you need to leave your seat, please ensure that you do wear a mask. Hand sanitizer is also available for you to use over in the corner of the council chamber. The meeting is a public meeting and is being live streamed for the public to view, so hello everybody at home. Can I ask that when you wish to speak, you raise your hand, and when the chair indicates you can speak, please ensure that your microphone is switched on. And when you finish speaking, please remember to switch off your microphone. Toilets are outside on the corridor, ladies to the left, men's to the right. And we're not aware of any planned fire alarms, so if the fire alarm does sound, please leave the chamber and make your way back out of the building towards the nearest fire exit, I think using that door over there. And the fire exit can be found off the stairwell to the right of the chamber, and the meeting up place is Tudor Square. Right, takes before you start the meeting. So, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Ben Curran, Councillor Sophie Wilson and Councillor Alison Teal, and Councillor Otten will be slightly late due to other urgent commitments.
I think it was Councillor Sophie Thornton.
Apologies, yes, Sophie Thornton.
We send our best wishes to Alison, who's got COVID. So, yes. Apart from apologies for absence, we have an unexpected item. Councillor Caltoun Rivers, who was the chair of this committee, has resigned due to studying commitments. She's following a PhD at the university, and it is just engrossing her, is the best way to describe it. If you meet Caltoun at the moment, it's all she can talk about. It's interesting, but she's gone on to that. So I think we should place on record our thanks to her for having started us off on our journey with this committee. And I would now like to propose that we elect a new chair. And I'm not going to make a power grab, it's all right. I'd like to propose Councillor Peter Garbett as the new chair of this committee. Can I have a seconder, please? Oh, I think that's unanimous if you raise your hand, Andrew. Thank you. That's a unanimous decision, and we'd all like to welcome Peter into his new role, and we're all going to be kind at his first meeting, aren't we, Andrew? I'm sorry, can I just say I'm going to have to go in half an hour for another meeting, but I will be back, like Arnie Schwarzenegger.
Thank you very much. I'm very nervous, so it's a good job there's not very many people here to see how I do. So, we've done the apologies for absence. Next is exclusion of public and press. I don't believe there's any reason to exclude anyone from any of our discussions. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay, move straight on. I'll go through the minutes of the previous meeting, which start on page 9. Please raise your hand if you have any quibbles with what's written down. Okay, page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17.
I move, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder for that? Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much indeed. Let's move on. Do we have any public questions and petitions? None? Right, so now we're going straight into item 7, which is the Place Systems Review housing project. And I believe it's yourself, Bev Malooly, who's going to do the presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. My name's Bev Malooly and I'm the housing lead for the Place Systems Review. So I'm going to take you through the report. The report was published in October, so it was published at the last Transitional Committee. So what I'm going to try and do today is focus on some key points from the report. So I want to focus on the reasons we're doing this, the costs that are included in the report and the presentation, the benefits and some key timescales. Okay, so can I have the next slide please. So the Place Systems Review, just a little bit of background about the Place Systems Review. It's across the whole of Place, and what we want to do is modernise the systems we use, but also some of the infrastructure and processes. We're starting in the Place Systems Review with the Housing and Neighbourhoods Service, because our systems, as it says on the slide, we've had the main housing management system, which is HOMES, which is the Hope and Housing Management System, since 1999. So a lot of our systems are quite old. And the other issue we've got with the systems in housing and neighbourhood service is that we've got a lot of systems that have grown up around HOMES. So HOMES is the main housing management system, but we've got other systems that we use. So we use a system called Abritas to do the choice-based letting. So that's where we advertise properties for letting and people can bid. Then we've got other systems. So there's one called Technology Forge. There's also Apex, and those systems are used around the assets and environmental services that we provide. And then we also use one called Flare. And Flare we use mainly around some of the stuff that's on the, I'd say, on the outskirts. So it's things around adaptation. So we've got, as you can see from there, they're not all the systems we use in housing. Hopefully it's just to give you a flavour for the different systems that we have got, and you can see there's quite a few. So as I said, HOMES needs to be replaced. It is fully operational, so it's supported. So any issues we have with the system, it is supported. So it's not going to fall over, but it is old and it's very creaky, the system. As I've said, the other systems that sit around it are also quite old as well, but HOMES is kind of what I would class as the kind of the main data source, so that provides the information on the assets as well. And what we're also looking to do, if we in the Housing and Neighbourhood Service can have a housing management system that manages assets, which we've got 39,000 to manage and some leaseholders, that we can probably see if we can use that across Place in its wider sense to manage the other assets we manage within the Place and across the council. Okay, next slide please. So what I wanted to discuss on the next slide was the opportunities for change. So what we did, early this year we carried out what we called a soft market test. So we went out to the market and said these are some of the things we want. So what you can see on the slide on the right hand side is what we've called the strategic enablers. And what they are, you'll see some things, I'll pull out a few. So we want online services, so we want customers to be able to access services online. We want a single system where we can gather all information about customers and also assets. We want to work flexibly. We want to work mobile, which is even more the case now due to COVID. We want to ensure that there's a lot more process automation rather than staff intervention in some of the things we do. We want to make sure the data is high quality, and we want to make sure, obviously, we've got performance information. When we went out to the soft market test, we were asking them if they could provide the the range of things that the Housing and Neighbourhood Service do. And what that showed was that when we went out, a lot of suppliers come back to us and they showed us their systems, and they said they can provide the majority of what we do within one system. So for us, we'll be looking at all the other systems that I said sit around the housing management system at this moment in time, and it will allow the Housing and Neighbourhood Service to stop using those for the majority of the work we do. In the longer term, having one system will be cheaper. So as I say, we've got lots of systems at the moment. And again, when we've implemented the system, and I'll go on to talk about, it will be a long process and it's a long project, is that we'll be able to bring about some long-term efficiencies as the system beds in. For us, having one system will allow us to have better quality data. So as you can imagine, working in the Housing and Neighbourhood Service, there's, when our customers contact us, there's a lot of system interfaces between what we do and the repairs system. So with the repairs service are looking at implementing a new system called Total Repairs, and what this will allow us to do is integrate very smoothly with that. So hopefully we'll be able to get more information with regard to customers and also assets. As I said earlier, the systems we've got are old and we need to modernise, and what we feel is that by having a new system, as I've said, we do a lot of manual intervention. We have some staff that are keying into one system and keying information into another system. The other issue we do have is somebody may ring a member of staff about rehousing, will note something about rehousing, but then it won't come across to any of the other systems. So what that means is potentially when we're trying to answer a customer inquiry, potentially we have to delve into several different systems to find that information. So it takes us longer to get hold of that information and resolve that inquiry. But what we can also do is, as you can imagine, the Housing and Neighbourhood Service, there's things that are changing all of the time. So we've got some things around fire safety, around regulation changing. We also want to ensure our properties are more energy sustainable. We're also looking at new initiatives, shared ownership, and a newer system will allow us to do that. With our existing systems, it'll be very, very difficult. So the main things, as I said, what it will also do, it will also allow us to integrate with other systems. So when I'm looking at Housing and Neighbourhood Service, and I used to work in the operational teams, we can gather information about council tenants where other systems and information such as Liquid Logic that social care use, we can't access that information. So we may be dealing with the same customer but not able to have that information. So hopefully again this will allow us to do that. Next slide. So as I said, the opportunities for change. So as well as looking at a new system, what we wanted to do is look at the processes. So we as a Housing and Neighbourhood Services, we've developed processes around a system. And we want to look at them because we feel that with a new system, it will allow us to be more efficient and more customer focused. So what we wanted to be able to do, well, we've already started to do this. So we've been talking to staff in the service, and it's mainly frontline staff who understand what customers want, what the inquiries are about the requirements. So what do we need a new system to do? So we've engaged, and I think we've gathered lots and lots of requirements, and we've engaged with about 100 members of staff. So we want to ensure that those staff are engaged not only now but throughout the process, because I feel they're key in for us knowing what is easy for them and what will deliver a better customer service. So we want to do that all the way along. We're also talking to customers. So we've talked to customers, we've talked to groups. We're also going out to do a survey in the next couple of weeks, which will try and establish what customers find difficult when trying to access the service that we provide. And the reason for doing that is so we can ensure that whatever we do with the new system, we're looking at what's important to customers, not necessarily what's important to us as members of staff, but what's important to customers. So we focus on things that will improve the service we deliver. What we are hoping to do, so I'll talk a little bit about timescales. In May next year, we're hoping to set up a model office. And in that model office, what we'll be doing is we'll be engaging again with staff from the service to test and build the system. So again, we'll have staff involvement and we'll have customer engagement throughout this period. Okay, next slide, please. So the funding. So as you can see, we've asked for 9.3 million. And what I've tried to do is break that down into the individual elements of it. So you'll see there's the technical and the systems. So I've already talked about the number of systems that we currently use, and going forward, even if we were to have one system going forward, we would still need to interface with different council systems. We'll also have to engage with HR, because if there's any changes from a staffing point of view and training, we need to take account of that. The backfilling for housing and neighbourhood staff, they're the staff we want in the model office, so we'll be asking for staff to come from the service who understand the processes currently to come and help us, and their posts will be backfilled within the housing service. The change resource, what that's about is when we're looking at the processes, we want to ensure that the processes going forward are fit for purpose and are as efficient as they can be, so then when we start to build the new system, we're getting as much out of it as we can. And then what we've got is that some development costs, and then we've included, and this is from the soft market test, we've included an estimate of the cost of the system for 5 years. So that's the bottom line. So as you can see from there, it's an expensive project, it's a long project, and it's complex, but what we want to do by doing it the way we're doing it, so we will have staff involved, we want to ensure that when we implement the new system, it will be as good as it can be. We'll have ironed out all the glitches that staff have identified and customers, and when we launch it, then hopefully the customer services will be good from day one. Okay, on to the next slide. What I wanted to do on the next 2 slides was just give you a little bit about what it would look like for a member of staff and what it would look like for a customer. So as I said earlier, the main thing for me, I'm from a housing background, and the main thing for me, the 2 objectives, is making this easy for staff to use, because ultimately, if it's easy for staff to use and gather information, then it improves the customer experience. So that's the main emphasis of this project. There's a lot of work that will go in the background, but that will be my main aim, is to ensure that those 2 things do happen. So what I've tried to do is explain that by having all our information about a customer in one system rather than in several systems, then hopefully people can ring us up, we can deal with the enquiry much quicker than we currently do. And when somebody tells us something, hopefully we'll update that information, and everyone who needs to access it on the contact centre, also any member of staff looking at that information will be able to get that updated information, and we'll have that readily available, and it won't mean that when somebody, the customer could ring someone else, they're updating that information. So hopefully that will have a positive benefit on the customer, and as I say, on members of staff. If we can have a final slide, please. Thank you. What we also want to do is, currently we have an online offer for customers to get in touch with us. So people can access the rent balances, pay the rent, they can make rehousing bids. It's not very well used at the moment, so what we want to do is improve that online offer. So hopefully as a customer, you'll have an online account, you'll be able to go into your online account and you'll be able to potentially report a repair, check your rent balance, pay your rent payment, and maybe look at your rehousing application. So therefore, once you go into the system, then it should open up a lot of information and you should be able to access that information. A lot of the calls we get from the contacts through the contact centre are things about, can I have my rent balance, and can I speak to someone about rehousing and making bids? And we feel by having this online portal, it will reduce those calls. So hopefully staff are dealing with the more complex enquiries where people need some advice and they're not able to access it online. So that's what we're hoping to do. And we'll also, which is something that we've already gathered information from, is that people would like reminders. So if we've made an appointment that we're going to go and visit somebody to do maybe an annual visit, that we'll send them a reminder the day before, remember I'm coming at 3 o'clock. That's something that tenants have told us they're interested in now. So from my point of view, it's just to let you know, but there's no slide for this, Claire, just to say that the time scale. So at this moment in time, we have sent out an invitation to tender. So we're looking at what the market is. We're hoping we'll evaluate that tender, and we're hoping to sign the contract in March next year, and then we'll begin to start and test and build the system, and the implementation will begin between April 2023 and September, and there could be more than one phase of the implementation. So that's where we are, and hopefully that's given you some flavour for what we're trying to do. Okay.
Thanks very much. That was very interesting. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Thank you for that. I've got lots actually, so it's nice that we've got lots of time. I think it's long overdue, but the other thing to say is it's a massive change, and don't underestimate the task ahead. The university's tried to do something for the last 2 years, and it's been unbelievably difficult. So did I hear you say that I'm getting 1 minute, I'm saying it's like bringing everything together, and then I'm getting other messages that were saying it's not part of the repairs service, it's going to be a different system to the repairs, and also it does or doesn't link to adult social care. So that's the first thing. And if repairs isn't part of it, why isn't it part of it? You talked about customers being able to use the system. So will they be able to, you know, if they get married or something like that and they change the name, are they able to just go in and do that themselves, or have they still got to, you know, how much control have they got at updating the details? Is there an opportunity, you talked about changing working practices. One big one for me is antisocial behaviour, and I just hope we can make something so much better. And is this an opportunity with that? So, you know, from the recording sheets and all that side of things, it just seems that the person that's suffering has to suffer for a long time. So I just wondered if that's an opportunity that we can build in. And not to forget, you know, this is all great technology and everything, but we've still got a large elderly population out there. We've got sheltered housing schemes, and I know that some of those people are tech savvy, but not everybody is. So, you know, we need to make sure we've still got that communication link for them. Is the system around a property, or is it around a customer? So I'm saying, you know, if a customer moves, does the address move, or is it the property as all the back? You know what I'm saying? It's like, I just don't know which way around the system will be worked round. I think that's it for me at the moment. Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead and answer those?
Try if I can remember. I agree, it is a massive, complex project, and that's why, obviously, I've come to try and explain, so it is big, and I don't think we underestimate the work that we need to do before we implement it, and that's why I think that the costs, because what we want to do is ensure we get everything right before we implement it, so there'll be a lot of staff involved in that, so I think we do, and IT projects are traditionally quite hard. They'll sometimes overrun, so yeah, I think it is a big task. What will happen, sorry if I didn't explain it very well, Karen, is the things that we currently use from housing management point of view, so OHMS, Abritas, Technology Forge, Apex and Flare, will all hopefully be in one system. And then the systems that sit around it, which is total repairs, which I think repairs and maintenance are on with implementing it this moment in time, and Liquid Logic has been in place for a couple of years, I think. So what will happen, as well as having everything in what I'd call my technical terms in a box, yeah, that what will happen is the interfaces to different systems will be much more robust than it currently is. So the housing management stuff will sit in the box, the other things will sit around it, but the interface and information sharing will be much better than it currently is, so we'll be able to get that information. So you asked about online. What we're hoping to do is we will give as much online access as we can. What we may have to do, there may be some things that are sensitive that we might have to have a check before we allow someone to change the name. So there may be some things we can't allow to do. Maybe not from day one, but we may be allowed from a later stage. So what we want to do is make sure the big things that people have told us they want to do. But as I said, with regard to a change of name, we've just got to be careful that someone doesn't go in and change a name and then it changes all our data. But we are hoping to do as much as we can online and give people the ability, if they want to do things online, then to be able to do that. I talked about processes, and one of the things I'm quite conscious of is that we have developed a lot of workarounds because we've got systems that I think don't lend themselves to modern ways of working. And I think one of the things we are keen on doing is currently looking at how we do things and challenging that with as eye on, as you said, Karen, the customer. So what we want to be able to do is think, how does this feel for a customer? How could we improve it for a customer? And as you said, some of the things we ask people to do in my opinion, is very outdated, filling diary sheets for antisocial behaviour, and hopefully they can report things to us online. So that's what we're hoping in the long run, that we will get better at a lot of the processes. And what we'll try and do is focus on the processes and the things that are important to customers. So we'll focus on them first. So the other stuff that might not be as important to a customer, we'll try and leave those. But as I said, by listening to customers, we'll hopefully be able to do the things that they want us to do as quick as possible. With elderly, I think one of the things for us, it's important when we engage with customers, we engage with a wide range of customers. So we know that what some of our younger customers might want is more online. We know what some of our older customers might want is not. So we've got to take account of that. So what we're not doing is we're not taking away the contact centre. Obviously, from a housing and neighbourhoods point of view, a lot of what we do is face-to-face. And what this will allow us to do, which should be a benefit for older people, is that if we've got mobile technology where we're able to go out as a member of staff with a tablet or a laptop, we can actually go in people's homes. So therefore that should be even more flexible, and we'll be able to, we can go, as you know now, we go into people's homes and we deliver a service, but it's very limited what we can do because of access to computer systems, where this one should be mobile. So the service you get when you're sat in an area office should be exactly the same as if you sat in someone's home. So hopefully for people that may be more vulnerable, the office should be better, because as I say, we'll be able to deliver more face-to-face. With regard to property and person, there's certain things we'll hold from a person and there's certain things we'll hold about an asset. But hopefully if those two things may be separate, they'll be side by side. So what you'll be able to do is see all information about a person, but also then be able to delve into any information with regard to a property. And what should happen is it should follow someone around. So if somebody moves to another council address, then that information should automatically follow the person. So we're not looking in two separate addresses for information about a person. It'll capture the information that needs to be transferred over. Thank you.
Is that okay for you? Yes, okay. I think it's Councillor Otten next.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for my late arrival. The Council did schedule me in 2 meetings at once. So thank you for the presentation, which I almost entirely missed. But the questions I wanted to ask on reading the report revolve, I suppose, around project risk. And I know Councillor McGowan referred to the university. I think she was diplomatic. I think they spent millions of pounds on a system they've ended up largely not using. And of course, the system initially was promised to deliver benefits of integrating multiple legacy systems and migrating data and so on. And I guess whatever the reason is, it didn't do that. So clearly these risks still exist. Now, I mean, for myself, I've had experience of medium-sized software projects like this from the other side, but probably 20 years ago, my knowledge is probably obsolete in terms of how things have happened. But it does seem to me that some of the risks are still there. So I suppose the question is, well, firstly, I have a couple of technical questions. So, for example, I see the figure of 1.5 million on the kind of system developers integration and that sort of stuff. It sounds like a high figure. It's not a particularly high figure for doing an awful lot of work. So that to me suggests, and is this right, that we're talking about a product that is largely off the shelf and it's just there is some development integration to do on, and which I think is probably a good idea, the right way to go. And then I suppose what expertise do we have in the council in terms of managing the client side of a project like this, and not making the mistakes the university did, because the university they have some smart people there at the university, I hear, and they can still make these mistakes. So I want us to be sure that we know what we're doing in terms of managing this project. What assurance can you give me on that?
I think you're right in that it is a big project. So what we'll do with the data is, because we've got to get data from a lot of different systems, there'll be a lot of data cleansing and migration issues. So we haven't got that skill, so we've had to appoint someone, because it's critical that we get the information out of the system and are able to put it into the system, because if we've got incorrect data in from day one, then obviously things will go wrong. What we've done is we've talked to other local authorities who've gone through a similar process with buying an integrated housing management system, and that's what Ohms was. So it was an integrated housing management system, and still is. So we've talked to people, and people have done it in different guises. So some it's been successful, some it's not been successful. So what we've tried to do when we've split it from into data and systems, into backfill and including people like myself, who was a housing officer, and also the programme and the business analyst. The reason for doing that is that's based on what they've told us, that you need to ensure you've got good data migration, you need to ensure you've got frontline staff that are involved in that. So what we're trying to do with mitigating the risk is listen to what other people have said, and then we have had experience when we did implement, and I wasn't involved in this, liquid logic. So again, we've had similar projects that we've done where we've implemented big systems that have an impact on potentially a lot of customers as this liquid logic from a social care point of view. So therefore we have got some experience, so we're using all that experience to try and make sure that any risks that we can come across, which as you said, there are a lot of risks with IT, that we're trying to mitigate that by planning this over a long period of time.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that's reassuring. I mean, I would like to know, I mean, maybe not speaking to the right person, who is, you know, are we clear who in the officer structure of the council is responsible for managing the risk as far as it lies with the council, and to what extent does it lie with the council in terms of the project risk of this?
We have a project group and a project board that's made up. So we've got project sponsors for this, and one of them is a guy called Mark Weston, who's does IT, that's his job. So we've got a lot of people within the project. So my role is I'm the housing lead, but we've got programme managers, we've got business analysts, as I said, we've got data people. So we've got, the team is quite, as you can see from the cost, it's significant, because what we've said is we need all these skills to do this project, yeah. So therefore what we want to be able to do is make sure within the team, we all bring a different skill set to be able to make sure that, as I said, from my point of view, I'll be looking at setting up the model office, looking at the processes, and trying to ensure that the customer, because we know the customers in housing, that they get the best service that they can, whereas there'll be other people who will have a slightly different role in that. And as I said, there's business analysts in there, there's programme managers. As I said, the sponsor on the board is a guy called Mike Weston, so he's been heavily involved in IT projects within the council. So we've got a lot of expertise within the whole of the project team.
Right. So to clarify, what I'm hearing is that the kind of the leadership of the project is in-house, and there are specific skills like developers, integration, and whatnot being brought in to implement that. And I'm not saying that's wrong. That may be the right way to do it. But I'm slightly nervous by what sounds like leadership by committee of this in-house project. So, I would appeal, and maybe, again, may not be speaking to the right person, but to somebody higher up in the council to say, let's not make sure this doesn't have the risk associated with leadership by committee, and that there is clarity and skills and experience in leadership of this, because otherwise I do fear that because of the nature, not because anybody is, not without anybody being at fault, because of the nature of the project, we are taking on a huge amount of risk, and if we're looking at spending £9 million, and we don't get our new system, then I'm going to download the webcast of this, and it'll have me warning the council this is going to happen. So you've got to get it right, and this is the chance to make sure the leadership is, and it might be worth bringing somebody in, or bring somebody in who can have that, who, with the right kind of experience, who can offer the overall leadership to the project, because if you're going to spend this amount of money, it's worth getting it right. That's not really a question. I'm sorry, and I'm not getting at you, but it's an appeal. It's an appeal to the powers that be in the room. Where are they? Not here. Okay. Can we minute that and pass that minute on to the executive, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Otten. I believe Councillor Sanger has a question, or two, or three.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I think to really just follow up Councillor Otten's point. I mean, I think one of the problems that, as members, is that we've had so many horror stories over the years of when ICT systems do not deliver what they were meant to, that tends to come back to us more than the ones that the project worked well, it came in on budget, came in on time and delivered a really good system for 10 years. We as members don't know those, but we do know the other 25 that we've been through, where most systems end up after 4 or 5 years having not delivered what they were going to do, that they nearly always run short. And clearly you're talking here about a system that's been here for 20 years. It clearly was never designed for 20 years. So I mean, I think my question is how long do you expect this system to last? And what does the future of what does the customer of that date look like? And what does the service of that date look like? Because it feels to me there's a danger of procuring a system that's right for now rather than a system that's right for 10 years. And I say, I've been through some real horror stories, not just in this council, but in other parts of local government that I've heard about. So local government's not got a great record, but we're not the only ones. I mean, the private sector and central government have got lots of horror stories about IT procurement. It's a known problem.
I would say this. I think some of the times, I think that maybe the system and the IT doesn't work as well as it could is because of the involvement of, I think, staff involved in using that system. And I think the beauty of what we're trying to do here is, I've been involved now for some time and involving people who are going to use the system, because I think they're the best people who understand what frustrates them as members of staff when they're dealing with telephone calls or somebody comes into a reception point or we go out and see someone. And tenants and customers will tell them what frustrates them. So what I think is by getting us involved, and we will have a lot of involvement in it and involving customers, hopefully we will get the things right from the start of this. Whereas I think in the past sometimes by not understanding what the issues are for frontline staff, and for me one of the main things is that the system, the current system's not easy to use, and as you say, I don't think it was meant to be around 20 years after, but it's not that easy to use, it's not intuitive, and one of the main things we need it to be is easy for staff to use to deliver that service. I think from a point of view, when we've looked at other local authorities, they've generally had a new system approximately every 10 years. So, and for me at this moment in time, until we get the tenders back and know what the suppliers have got to offer, we can't really say, is it you know, there'll be some that come back that may be quite futuristic and things, but we won't know until we get them back. But as you say, I think when we're planning on doing this project for a 3-year period, we've got to try and ensure that it is future-proof. Otherwise, when we implement it, potentially it could be out of date. So that's one of the things we need to be mindful of, is looking towards the future. And as I say, some of the things that we'd got in the strategic enablers were around mobile working and flexible working, and I think even more so now because of COVID that's become even more of an issue. That I said earlier, we need staff to be able to go into people's homes with the right IT to be able to deliver a service. So I think it's come to the forefront, some of the things that we've actually. So as I say, I'm not saying I can sit here and say the system will still be here in however many years, but the intention will be, as we work with the suppliers, to be able to ensure that we get a system and processes that are fit for purpose for as long as possible.
Thanks for that. I mean, the cynic in me say that's exactly what officers said to me in the procurement of the OHS system about going into tenants' homes and about flexibility. And so, here we are 21 years late, and clearly later and saying, well, it's now tired. Well, clearly it's going to be tired. I mean, software's, computers have moved on a lot. I think one of the big challenges you face, particularly in housing, although this is not a housing system, this is a place system, it is about the customer base you have. And I think we as members are, because the people we see tend to be the elderly, the frail tenants. We don't just say the others, but the rest of the world has moved on to digital by default. And I think I would certainly want a system now where tenants can access all the information about them, and because it's the expectation when you deal with any other organisation, and I think the days of everybody going to the housing office have gone, even if we have tenants who still value that service. I do think we need to be thinking, what will the system and the service look like in 10 years' time, rather than what does it look like now? And I think that's got to be a guiding light. And if you're saying 3 years, it's going to take 3 years, and it's 13 years, and that 13 years is the world will look very different in 13 years' time. So how do we get the assurance that you will do something for 12, 13 years' time, not for now?
Okay. What we are trying to do is, when we do the customer engagement, we are trying to look at it through a different lens. So what we're trying to do is get as much customer involvement to try and understand what it would look like for a customer. So a young customer, what would it look like in 10 years' time? As you said, for some of our customers, they are elderly. But I don't think it's to say that elderly customers don't want to access things online. Some don't, but some do. So for us, it's trying to give as much online as we can, so that they can sit and look at the rent balance and report a repair at 7 o'clock in an evening, or they can access services. And that's what we've got to look at. That I think it has become more about, people wanting to do things outside traditional office hours, and people wanting quite a quick response as well. So we've got to enable our staff that if somebody does contact us online or request a service, we've got to be able to respond quickly, which traditionally I don't think we've been very good at that. And hopefully by having these new systems in place, what they will do is they'll have the information and they will be able to respond quickly. And I think, as I said, that's what we're hearing from customers. In sometimes we take a long time to respond. We ask them to fill forms out to log antisocial behaviour. So they're the kind of things we are looking at.
Thank you. I mean, we know all of the larger councils in England are quite differently structured in terms of the services they deliver. And so if I was an ICT provider, I would be saying, well, there's nothing on the shelf, we need to come in and do some bespoke work. What evidence have we got that other large councils haven't bought something off the shelf that actually does 90% of what they wanted, and that would be largely a better way of going down this, rather than ending up something which is half off the shelf and half bespoke? What's the evidence base for going forward this way?
As I said, with the soft market test, some of the suppliers came back and they demonstrated their systems, so it showed some of what their systems could do. I think one of the things that I was probably impressed by was the kind of what is the workflow. So you could see things moving between different members of staff and alerting when it needed something doing. At this moment in time, we haven't got any of that. And I think it's fair to say that any integrated housing management system, whatever's in the box, I think it has to be amended. It has to be refined and tested, because as you said, we're set up differently. You would think that all local authorities would be quite similar in the way they operate the housing service. It's not the case. So what we're hoping is we'll get as much in that box, and that's the point of going out and gathering all the requirements, talking to staff, that the box, what we're classing that is a parcel. So we're hoping that parcel and box is as full as it can be, and then what we'll have to do is tweak it where we think it's necessary, because the more we tweak the system and change the system, and we did that with the system we've had for 20 years, it becomes harder when you want to upgrade that system. So what a lot of the suppliers will do, if there's something new in legislation, they will upgrade their system. So in an ideal world, you'd plug it in and the upgrades would happen. What we need to be mindful of is the more we kind of update the system to make it more Sheffield, the less easy it is to do that. So we've got to be careful. So it's a bit of a balance between getting as much in the box as we can, but making sure then that there might be bits of it that are not fit for purpose. And for me, as I said, those bits that are fit for purpose, we might want to change our ways of working and our processes. But for the bits that don't, then we would want to change those, because, as I said, what we're focusing on is making sure it's the customer experience. So if we think from a point of view, if a customer said it's really important that a system does this, then that's what we need to ensure, that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that system does do that. And if that means us tweaking it, then we'll try and do that. So as I say, it's a balance between the integration, because there's a lot of advantages in having something that's in a box, but I think with the best will in the world, we'll always have to make some amendments to that system.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for the questions and thanks very much indeed for the answers. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much then.
I mean, thank you, Chair. I mean, I feel we've approached it slightly like a scrutiny committee, and we need to get into the habit of not being a scrutiny committee. And we've had a presentation on the system, and I must say I was surprised. I was slightly puzzled. One thing that slightly puzzled me is that the way the system that is wanted has been described. I could almost imagine we'd heard a sales pitch from a vendor and said, this is what we can do, and then they've come to us and say, well, this is what the new system can do. And when I was working in software, the software developers like myself were always very, very angry with the salespeople, is that because of the things they chose to offer and the way they chose to do it. And their view was say, tell the customer they can have whatever they want, and then it's the developer's job to make that possible. And if we told them that's going to be really difficult, that's going to be really expensive, they didn't really care. That wasn't their problem. That was our problem. But clearly that's not the case, because we're before that stage. We're not basing this on a sales pitch from a vendor. We're basing it on a plan for how we're going to go about it, which is more reassuring. But I'm not reassured that the council is necessarily going about this in the right way, or we're quite ready to press ahead with a procurement exercise in terms of our setup. And given that we're not a scrutiny committee and we're not calling something in and we're not, referring it back to the executive, I want to know what we are doing here, because, I think the council, somebody needs to do a bit more work. This is a transitional committee. I'm not sure what that is, but I think we need to have a recommendation or something to somewhere to say, well, this is what we think about this. And I think what we think is we are nervous about the plan because based on the amount of information we've had. So we want the council to do some more work to make sure it's going about this the right way. Can I propose we make that recommendation, or shall we discuss that a bit? I mean, that's what I would suggest.
It's a really good point, and I think we need to discuss what we are going to do with this. I'm not sure Bev needs to be here to be a part of those discussions. I'm just thinking that your time is valuable as well. So. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Please bear with me. This is part of the integrated plan of updating all of our IT services. And the main reason for that is that they're all on the verge of basically collapse. We have to be honest about that. 23 years ago, these systems were put into place, and we need to have an integrated system that will work with the repair service total system that is being installed as we sit here today. In the long term, this will save the council an awful lot of money as well. At the moment, we pay a substantive amount to the call centres and call handling. Over 60% of those calls will revert to online over the next 2 years, which will take the pressure off that we all suffer as councillors in getting complaints about getting through to that service. So I would like to put a proposal that we authorise the officers to continue to work on this and to take it forward, but to report back prior to actually making the decision to implement the system, which I think is very similar to what Councillor Otten is saying. But I would like to propose that we authorise the officers to continue to work on this and to report back to the committee when they feel it's appropriate to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. if I could have a say beforehand, I think what we've heard today is quite exciting, and I think it's needed. And I think what we need to do is to keep an eye on it and make sure that all the worries that we have, and I share some of your worries, Councillor Rotten, are addressed as and when they arise, because it's possible that they won't arise. I think it's unlikely that we won't have some problems. Whether they're the ones we've foreseen is a different matter. So I think I'd like to add that, you know, we need to keep an eye on this, but we are a transitional committee. We don't have any decision-making powers at the moment. If we can make a suggestion as to when this should come back to us before any recommendation is passed on, then that would be good. Does anyone have any thoughts on when that should be? When do we want a report back from here? Do you want to?
If I could just, I'm Janet Sharp. I'm the Director of Housing at Sheffield City Council. I'm here today deputising for John Mattlewraith, Executive Director, obviously, of People Services. The council, over the last 10, 20 years, has a strategy for updating its information technology-like systems. The reason it does that is because technology moves on, services move on, and we need to respond to both customers and also service needs in order to be able to deliver services efficiently. And I think, members here today will remember that there's been a number of finance systems that the council has introduced. Recently, People Services have introduced, some new IT systems, Liquid Logic for its children and services, and adult social care services. And one of the things that this system will do will enable the integration of systems in the council. And that can only be good news for the customers we serve, and also officers' ability to be able to work within systems and get that real-time information and data about the people that we're obviously serving on a day-to-day basis. Housing hasn't replaced many of its systems for over 20 years. And it probably should have been replacing its systems before now. But now is the absolutely right time to be replacing those systems, because alongside housing, there's been significant investment by the council on many replacement-like systems, and housing's been the one that's probably lagged behind. And now one of the things that we need to do is we need to change the way we deliver our services. And this is an opportunity for us to do that. I think that what we will do, as Councillor Wood has set out, this will enable us to deliver our services differently. There is nothing more frustrating, from officers who are working in a tenant's home that's trying to access 4 different systems to try to be able to respond to that customer. And what this will enable us to, it will empower those officers to be able to improve the quality of the services that they provide. What it will also do is provide, real life information about what we need to deliver as services and what our customers expect of us in delivering those services. And also, has been mentioned, that online offer, people be able to, access systems and information to do that. So, although I recognise that this is a lot of money, there has probably been issues in the past with upgrading systems. I think that we've learnt from all of those replacement systems, and there is a dedicated team of experts in the council from data analysis to people who understands technology and the systems that shall enable us to learn from any issues like in the past, to make sure that we don't repeat some of those issues. As part of the programme for this replacement of systems is that there will be a model office in the spring set up. Now that's where the real hard work starts. You know, working with a provider, actually working with officers who use systems day in, day out, to be able to make sure that once we get to that implementation stage, you know, we've ironed out some of the issues that we might come across during that process. So it feels to me, you know, round about the springtime when the model office is established, and actually when we've been working quite closely with the provider, might be an ideal opportunity to say this is some of the learning that we've found, this is how we're going to take this project forward, and maybe there could be an ongoing monitoring report that monitors the progress of the implementation of the system.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Otten and then Councillor Sanger.
Turn off your mic, please. There we go. Thank you. Yes, I mean, thank you for the contribution. I certainly don't want to hold this up. I fully accept that this is that the systems need replacing. My nervousness is about project management. I suppose to summarise in 2 words. What I would like to ask for is a report from the officer who will be the leader of the client team for the project, in terms of the client side of the contract for the contract for the work. The officer leading that team, if there is someone, which I assume there will be someone, I would like a report from that person to come to us before, in reasonable time before the contract award itself, so we can kind of ask questions about what the plans are in order to mitigate the risk to the council of the project failing. Basically, I mean that's it in a nutshell. Is that something that sounds a reasonable ask over there? I mean, because and if we have that, I'm happy to sing the praises of this project as I've been asked to do.
Thank you, Councillor Sanger.
Yeah, I've heard what Councillor Wood and Janet Sharp have said. More than happy for it to come back in March and April when we've got this in model office and when the first stage of the contract has been procured. I just want to pursue this issue of how the process will work, of how the committee system will work post-May. So we know how it used to work. So, and one of the problems is we've got COVID, and therefore none of us are sort of. We're moving to a committee system at the same time as coming out of COVID, and COVID is still getting in the way in terms of how we work as elected members, and it's clearly working. It's clearly still working. Frustrating how officers are having to work and how members of the public are engaging with council services. So COVID has made it more difficult with this transition period. But if we go back before COVID, there was a cabinet member, and the cabinet member would be briefed. The cabinet member would have a rolling programme of work over the next 6 to 12 months. The cabinet member would say, oh, I don't like this, or I want to involve another cabinet member, or this is a bit of work where I need my cabinet advisor to be in. And then once they'd done that diligence work over a 2 or 3 month period, then the cabinet member with the head of service and the executive director would then go and would start selling the programme to whoever needed it. And the problem and then by the time it came to scrutiny, we as members who were not on the cabinet would do well, have you gone through the right process? Have you done diligence? What else have you looked at? Now, all of that ends in May, and in May we start a totally different way of working. And so in May we're still going to have a scrutiny role of when a service is not delivering what the people of Sheffield want, we will still have a role in saying, what can we do to make the service better? But we're going to be involved much more at an earlier stage, much more how cabinet members have been involved. And you know, even with this report, we're not quite there yet, because this report doesn't talk about how it integrates with other council systems. It doesn't talk about program, because this report, quite rightly, has come out of the old system. This is and the cabinet member, the head of service, has basically been saying this is the decision we've already taken. So we're not here early enough, and that's the problem. When we come and sit here in June, we have to sit here at the beginning of the process, and that's going to be very difficult because, as Janet Sharp has quite rightly said, you can't stop a process that is already late. And we as members have to find a way through this. And I just feel we're not at it yet. I mean, I'm really grateful for Councillor Wood bringing it here at an early stage. But I tend to take the point Councillor Curran made very clearly at the last meeting. We've got to get here early and ask the big picture questions. Otherwise, we're just going to go into the routine. We'll just be scrutiny councillors, or we'll just say this is the experience we got from a few tenants we've heard at the Tara meeting. We need to get in there early and understand what are the options and what are the decision points. And on this one, I feel it's been really useful as an update. And I think it's good to come back in March, April, but we haven't quite got there early enough. And so I think what we really need when we go on to the next item is to understand what are the decisions that the council is going to take in 22, 23, 24, and be there at the beginning and understand the big picture decisions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Before I call in Councillor Wood, I'd like to make 2 points. First of all, the points you make are really good, and they will be for the Governance Committee to deliberate on. I'll take them to the committee as chair of this one. And I think the other one that's important to make is that by April, this committee will no longer be sitting because it'll be in Perda. And so this has got to be a legacy for the follow-on committee from this one to probably to hear what is going to be said by the person who's in charge, who's going to bring the report. So that's 2 points that I'd like to make before going to Councillor Wood. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. I agree 100% with Councillor Sanger. We've been working on this project for nearly 6 months, and it needed to come in at the start, as you quite rightly say. If I can make a suggestion, Chair, that might be useful for the committee going forward. There are a number of items that we haven't done a lot of work on, such as the allocations policy, the affordable housing policies, which we could refer into the committee, and that would necessitate actual work on development of policy on those areas. Whereas something like this and the repairs IT, it's been going on for probably 12 months now. So, with your permission, I will forward to you from my portfolio responsibilities some areas that the committee and you as chair may want to do some work on that would be beneficial to my portfolio.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wood. I very much appreciate that. And I think I take on board what you're saying as well. I think it is important that this committee demonstrates as a transitional committee what we would, as a committee following the transition, be doing. So I very much welcome that offer, and yes, we'll see what we can do to try and formulate some policy instead of just scrutinising it. Has that satisfied? I thought you were going to keep your hand down there for a moment, Councillor Otten.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just on the last point, I think the next item on the agenda is looking at the forward plan of decisions in this portfolio to see what we might want to bring to this committee, because that's, I mean, this has come up at the previous meeting of this committee when you weren't here, before you were on this committee. So, and we said, can we look at the executive decisions in this portfolio area and see what we might want to call in, or not call in, call in's the wrong word, what we might want to discuss. And so that's there, so we'll come to that in a moment. But my proposal, my request was that we have a report from the leader of the the client side of the project team. And that would have to be before March 22 on this timetable on page 25, because the contract is to be awarded in March, we hope. So I would hope, therefore, that we could have that report in February or thereabouts. Is that something we can agree to?
I'll call on Janet Sharp to answer that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Otten. I think it would be really helpful for the project director for this project and the project team in March, which will coincide with the award of the contract, to actually do a clear presentation in terms of how this project will move forward, its priorities, and also the timescales for the implementation and the changes that we expect to see. So I think in March we should be able to do that at this committee, if that is something that would be helpful for members of this committee.
Thank you.
I'm not clear whether that's an agreement or a counter offer.
I took it as agreement. I think if we agree that there will be a detailed report in March, is that okay? Yeah. Good. Has anyone got anything to say on how that's gone, that particular item there? Because I think two reasons. One, it's the first time I've chaired a committee like this. And two, we are looking at how we operate. We are trying to work out a better way of operating as a committee. So maybe if there's time after this meeting, we can have a short discussion, much more informal, about how we feel about that. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So that was item 7. Item 8, issues referred from or to local area committees. Are there any of these?
No, we've not received any, Chair.
Okay, so we then go to the forward plan of key decisions.
Sorry, Chair, on that item, I do believe that full council asked each transitional committee to consider what areas might be devolved to local area committees. So that would be an item that should be under this. Am I mistaken?
I don't have any information on that.
Sorry, I don't have any information about what was discussed at full council, but if it was agreed at full council that you would do that, then this would be the item.
Right. I suppose it is. I understand the minutes of not the full final minutes are in a bit of a backlog for full council for reasons that are understandable. So I hope this doesn't just drag on. I don't know. If we have to wait for the official minutes to come out before we can do something, then that's unfortunate. But I hope we next time we do this. Thank you.
We could, I suppose, spend a couple of minutes wondering, thinking, making proposals about what might come.
We could, but I was hoping to have some officer support in thinking about this rather than just, we could all, as members, we've been discussing this for months, but I think, I'm happy to. I don't want to argue with you, Chair, but it isn't exactly what I was asking for.
Okay. So we then move on to item 9, which is the forward plan of key decisions, which is starts on page 27 and goes to page 46. Have we all had a chance to have a look at this? Do you have anything to say on it?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've just done a very brief cover report to go with the forward plan of key decisions, or schedule of forthcoming executive decisions, and yeah, I mean, I've not made any specific recommendations. I think it was fairly obvious which decisions come under the remit of this committee. But if you need me to comment on which ones do, then I'm happy to do that.
Right. Is there anything there that we need to consider more fully today?
I think it would be difficult to consider anything that's not on the agenda more fully, but it certainly would be. I mean, we're kind of feeling our way with this really, because this is the first time that we've put this on as a standing item. So I kind of wasn't really sure quite how it would work, which is why I've just done a very brief cover report. And I don't know whether members want me to go. If we want to go through the plan, we can do. Identify which ones are relevant to this committee. There are a few in here, I think. And I presume that if members have highlighted something in this document that they want to look at in more detail, then what I can do is then build it into the work programme for the future, so that you've got items. I guess the difficulty with this is that probably most of these, if they're at the stage where they're in the forward plan of key decisions, then they're quite well worked up already. So going back to the previous point, I don't know how early members would be commenting on them, but I'm happy to build anything into the work programme.
Councillor Otten?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, just to be helpful, I mean, I think this is coming from, as I alluded to a moment ago, a request at a previous meeting of this committee that we have the option of examining issues on the forward plan that fall within the remit of this committee. And so this has come to us, I think, to say, which of these issues do you want us to look at? We don't, not to look at right now, but hopefully that we have a chance to consider a report on an issue in advance of the executive decision. And the one that leaps out for me, if it's not too late, is the first item, the street tree strategy. I think that would be of great interest to members of the committee and merits debating in a committee meeting under the cameras, as opposed to an executive member decision in a smoke-filled room. So I think this is in the spirit of the new system of how the council does things. I think we should consider that at our next meeting, if at all possible, but certainly in advance of the executive decision. So can I request that we agree to do that?
Councillor Wood?
I think that decision went live this week, Councillor Otten. It's on the council website.
Right. So, seems like we're a bit late on that one. Are there any others? It looks as if is the item on page 31, acceptance and issuing of Sheffield City Region Brownfield Housing Fund grant funding. Is that anything to do with, do we need to have a look at that?
Chair, no, that's under the Executive Member for City Futures Development, Culture and Regeneration, which is Transition 3, I believe.
I can't see a great deal else.
Chair. I mean, there's obviously the HOA business plan and budget, but once again, that's clearly a rolling piece of work. It comes for decision by the cooperative executive, but historically, how are we acting any way different to the scrutiny? I mean, scrutiny. My recollection is scrutiny hasn't gone through it line by line anyway. We've tended to have briefings as members, and then we've tended to, it either being a separate item at full council, or it's been part of part of the budget council. And I'm just trying to think what would be a good way of this committee tackling it, given that I guess all the key decisions will have been taken over the last 9 or 10 months, and we're coming in at the end of the process. Other than that, I can't see what else, as Councillor Otten says, I can't see which of the other items are ours.
Councillor Wood?
With the HOA business plan, it will be ready in its draft form in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then what would normally happen to me is proposed, and I've suggested we keep to this, is the Director of Housing will report that into your respective groups, so you will get a briefing within your political group, as will the Green Party. Then we have to go out, as you know, as a Sangha, to consultation with ANAB and the residents, and then it needs to come to council, I think, by the February meeting in order to agree any changes in rents or terms and conditions within that. So I don't really feel it fits in with this committee at all at this stage, and I think it would delay things and lead us into massive time problems because of the lack of time to deal with it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. So are we saying that just at the moment we'll take note of what's in the timetable, but I don't...
Yeah, that's fine, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Otten.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm tempted to say that if Councillor Wood doesn't want us to consider the HRA business plan, then maybe we should. But again, it's the larger question is what this committee is for, I suppose. The three items that spring out as being relevant to this committee are as the tree street strategy, as I've said, and we could possibly ask for a presentation on that, even though it's already gone through, bearing in mind that we don't want to behave like a scrutiny committee if we can help it. The provision of post-mortem services is under this, under us. I don't know if I'm not desperately keen to bring it to this committee, but it would be an option under this report. And then, yes, the HRA again. So I think that there are three options that we could consider asking for reports to come to a subsequent meeting. I'm not there. I don't know. I think we should consider each of those three as possible. So I'm not going to die in a ditch on any of them. But if we're not going to take any of them, I think we've got to ask ourselves, what on earth are we going to do as a committee? Because I think this is looking at future executive decisions before they happen should be the bread and butter work of this committee. And if it isn't, then I've misunderstood what these committees are, and I wonder if they have any purpose at all. So that's what I offer you. Let's take at least one of those.
Councillor Richards.
I think that's a bit difficult at the moment, Councillor Otten, because we do still have a cabinet, so we aren't actually decision takers as such this year. We've been asked to work at things and look at things that we might consider that committees ought to be doing next year. So it may be that one of the scrutiny committees will want to indeed look at the HRA, or it will indeed come to full council, I believe. So from that point of view, it won't be lost and it won't be unscrutinised and unlooked at by anybody else. Because we aren't a decision-making committee this year, we're the thinking about how it's all going to be next year, aren't we? And we do have a cabinet who will do that, Joe.
No.
So if you want to look at it, what would be the exciting things in it that you think we ought to be digging into?
So thank you, Councillor Richards. No, I don't think we are the thinking about how it ought to work next year committee. I think that's the governance committee. I think this committee has been given a policy remit in a number of areas, and it ought to consider policy in those areas because that is the remit we've been given. The policy functions have been taken away from the scrutiny committees and given to us. And to me, that means considering executive decisions before they're made and, you know, commenting on what options might be considered. I mean, I think that it may be pointless, you may consider it pointless, but I think given that we've been established and we've been given that remit, I think we ought to do it. Now, if members don't want to consider any of the three options before us, then we don't have to consider them. But I do wonder, well, we could just ask the full council to abolish us and all go and do the rest of our jobs, couldn't we?
Thanks, Councillor Otten. Councillor Wood.
Firstly, the HRA is not an executive decision, it's a full council decision. Secondly, the best way for you to know what's in the plans is to have the briefing within your group, which is offered each year. Thirdly, if the HRA is prescribed by a time limit of days, we have to get consultation with residents. It has to go automatically to be looked at by scrutiny. If they decide not to want to look at that, that's their decision, but it's available to scrutiny and the scrutiny process, and it needs to be voted on, as I said, very early in the new year by the full council because of the timescales of implementation of the mentioned changes that need to be put in. So I believe it's probably the most scrutinised piece of work that we as a council do. We don't do the amount of briefings on this in any other thing whatsoever. So I do find it a bit of a cheap shot when you say that the reason I don't want you to come here is the reason for bringing it here, but I don't really appreciate remarks like that.
Yeah, my apologies, Councillor Wood. I appreciate it was a cheap shot. Yes, I'm quite happy not to request the HRA to come to this committee if that's on the basis of what you said. Let me therefore propose that we ask for a report, or a presentation, let's say, on the street tree strategy, even though the decision's been made, and that we can consider the policy implications on that going forward out of these three. Because I think if we don't do that, then we had ought to consider whether this structural transition committee is worth having. Whether it's a policy issue of very great interest to the people of Sheffield. It's caused, let's say, a little bit of a political political earthquake in the city, on two counts at least. So I think it's something that that as a council we ought to be seen to be taking a great deal of interest in. And I would propose that we ask for a report on the street tree strategy to come to our next meeting, if I have a seconder.
Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, I just find, I don't know if I'm getting confused now, but you're contradicting what you're saying about, 1 minute you're saying, why should we be looking in this committee at decisions that have already been taken? We should be looking ahead in the future. Now you want to look at something that's already had a decision made on it. I personally, and I don't know if this is possible, we've got somebody new at head of youth service, and how that person is going to help us with antisocial behaviour in our communities and improving all of that. She's new in post, and if we can influence some of that now for the future, I'd like to see her come personally and see if that's something we can work on around communities.
Thank you.
Could I just pick up on that? I have actually, and I was going to come to it on the work programme item, I have been discussing with the new head of youth service, and the intention is to try and bring an item on that as soon as possible.
Thank you. And I certainly think that talking to people within the community and people who are doing work in communities, and the youth service is a really useful one, is a way we can identify work that needs doing, which is basically what Councillor Otten has been talking about. If I can point Councillor Otten to item 10, work plan and ways of working, where we will be discussing how we intend to go on and what we feel our purpose is, and how we intend to fulfil that purpose. So, Councillor Otten has made a proposal.
I shall second it then. I mean, I do think if you go, you know, around the city and around the country, Sheffield is known as the place that chops street trees down. Understanding where we're going to be in 5 years' time and how we change that reputation is really of real importance.
Quite obviously, being in the Green Party, I have a lot of sympathies with that, but that's not necessarily the remit of this particular committee. I'm happy to take a vote on it. So, if you want to bring the street trees policy to this committee, please put your hand up now. Okay, thank you. If you feel that that's not what this committee is for, please put your hand up now. Okay. I'll go with the majority on that.
Can I have my vote recorded, please?
And mine, Chair.
Can I, sorry Chair, this is me throwing my 2 pennies in afterwards, sorry. We are going to be having an independent review of the whole tree thing, aren't we? Would it be something that we might look at when that has been set up? Is that also outside what we might do, Paul?
I'm very happy for the committee to receive a written report on exactly where we are with all the tree issues. And I can get the officers to forward that, if you would like that, Chair.
Thank you very much. That would be helpful. Yes?
I believe we have advertised this week for an independent chair of the commission.
Yeah, I'm slightly puzzled because it was agreed in June that we would do this. I'm not quite, and that we hope they'd be in post by October, so I'm not quite sure what the delay has been.
I think persuading people that it's a really great job to do.
So I think we move on now to the last item on the agenda, work plan and ways of working. So, do you want to take this?
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me a second, I'll just get to the right page. Okay, so this is the second report, obviously with it being the second meeting that I've done of this nature. The cover report is a standard report. I guess the bits that we need to discuss are in the table that is appended. If I just run through the table as it stands at the moment, obviously this is the November meeting, so you've just had the play systems review. In terms of the youth strategy, it says, I think originally there was a suggestion that it would be a working group in this early part of the year. As I said, I've been having discussions with the newly appointed head of youth service. I think one of the difficulty was that she was facing kind of fairly early into post, and she was dealing with an Ofsted inspection. So that's why it's been difficult to get anything to the committee prior to this date. But my intention was to have a meeting with she's called Chelsea. My intention was to have a meeting with Chelsea and focus on the housing and the community safety issues of the youth strategy. Given that that's the kind of remit of this committee, and obviously youth strategy is quite cross-cutting, so it will kind of cut across some of the other committees as well. So my intention was to try and focus very clearly on that, on the kind of housing and community safety issues, if people are happy with that. What I was also going to try and do was, rather than bring it as a formal report, was to try and do it a little bit more informally, in the sense of maybe asking Chelsea to do a bit of a presentation on the strategy, I know that when we had an agenda discussion prior to this meeting, members were kind of comfortable with that approach or testing out that approach with this committee. So again, I'd be really interested in members' thoughts or feedback on that in terms of what kind of format they want that information from Chelsea. The sustainable neighbourhoods and communities, that was also brought up in the agenda setting meeting. So this concept of sustainable neighbourhoods and what we mean by that, and I note that the chair and vice chair have tabled something on community resilience. If we go over the page, social housing, Councillor Wood's already mentioned this about the allocations policy coming to this committee. So again, I've put down there, you've obviously already identified repairs and maintenance and registered private providers of social housing, which is the new terminology, which escaped me last time I was speaking to members. So again, any work that you want to do around that heading can be determined today. I think there was an agreement at the last meeting that we would move to a working group sooner rather than later on the repairs and maintenance. So it would be really helpful, if that's what members still want to do, that if we could maybe get a way forward from today in terms of setting that working group up. And for the next meeting, we are having the cladding item that was requested under the work programme discussion last time. And also, we've got scheduled for the next meeting an item on the private sector, which was requested also. So again, it would be useful to get some feedback on how members would like that item presented and covered at the meeting, so that I can feed back to officers and give them a clear steer.
Thanks very much. Can I make an inquiry first off, and then I'll open it up? The cladding item, obviously this is an item that the fire service might be willing to talk to us about. Coincidentally, I've been at a meeting this morning of the Fire and Rescue Authority, and the report there says that they have now completed the survey of all the buildings that had been reported to have cladding problems. So it might be really useful for us to hear from them. Is that okay? Yeah. Any questions about what we would prefer to see here? Councillor McGowan.
I just wanted to ask, when we're looking at youth, it's that whole community, so it's about how does the youth service link up with the police and the voluntary sector and all of that. You know, I'm just thinking, I've had some antisocial behaviour in my ward, but how, you know, and the police are dealing with it, but how does that link in with the youth service, and how can we deal with that together, all the organisations?
Sorry, Councillor Richards.
Thank you. Sorry, on cladding, when you said that the fire service has written a report, it would also be useful to know what we're doing with our own buildings as well. So if we could have, I certainly would welcome the fire service coming to talk to us about their work, because I know it's been quite arduous. But also if we can just talk about our own buildings which are cladded. Is that the word? Clad. And also, I think, Andrew, you raised it in the first place, didn't you? So are there sort of private sector concerns that you wanted to raise?
Yes, I mean, you know, we're 4 years post-Grenfell. I think we know the work that housing have done in terms of our stock. And you know, we did do a very big piece of scrutiny work in terms of the one, you know, that the Hanover block. So we sort of know that, but the issue now is across the piece, and it's about all buildings with cladding. It's not just it's not just council buildings above, council houses above 18 metres, and I'm particularly thinking of that 11 to 18 metre category, because the government is saying the private sector will find the money and the regulations don't need to change, and it's all going to be sorted. And that just means there's a lot of people in Sheffield, whether they're tenants or whether they're leaseholders, who don't know what their future is. I mean, clearly the fire and rescue service are, have an important part in this, and as you say, they have, they have to issue the fire safety notice to whoever owns the buildings. But I mean, I just want to better understand the situation and what more we as an authority can do about it.
Thank you. Yes, like I say, the report was given to us today, and I'm sure that they will be very happy to report back. But I did ask the question about those buildings underneath 18 metres. I'm not going to say I was that satisfied with the response. Okay. Councillor Wood.
Can I make a suggestion, Chair, that this is a general safety issue and not just cladding, because one of the big problems and the mass evacuations we've had to make from blocks has been the lack of firewalls, the failure of fire escapes. I think it goes further than just cladding, really, and I think it should be the safety of those blocks in general that we look at.
Again, that report does cover most of those elements, so it will be really good to have that report before us, I think. Thank you for that intervention. Councillor Richards.
It's me again, sorry. You have all got a piece of paper in front of you, I hope. Last week, Councillor Garbett and I had a meeting to discuss him taking over the committee and the things that he was hoping to see in our work programme. And we came, I think we came to an agreement, and if we didn't, he's going to tell you, about looking at the community resilience of our city, both financial, physical and mental, because we think that those are important issues in a sort of a COVID world and a post-COVID world. And we were looking at going evidence gathering and actually talking to people in a consulting sort of way. You'll notice the word cafe is in there. I haven't written the word cake, but I think you'll all just know that that is part of it. And we were just thinking that it would be good for members of this committee to be going out in ones or twos or threes or whatever, to either sit in a local cafe, having advertised they're going to be there, and talk to people who come in and say, what are some of your concerns around, and it could be whether you want to say one of these issues. I mean, housing repairs was something we thought of, and we thought Sophie would probably have a queue in her ward of people who'd want to talk to her. But also going to places that we don't usually go to, like play groups. I've just got the list of the play groups in my ward, and I'm looking forward to going to seeing them. But there are meetings, I don't know, in other places. Things like, do we want to piggyback other meetings or places and sort of pop in and say, while you're having your meeting, here we are, your councillors? Or do we want to do some stuff on our own and hope people will come? And how could we tie this in with the LAC? So I'm looking at Andrew here, because you actually chair a LAC, don't you? And whether you could take some of this out to your LAC and bring it back here, and that would be a way of making the LACs and the transition committees work together. But also something that Peter raised was that we've got all these proper experts in our city. We have 2 universities. We have all sorts of industry and people that we could also ask in to talk to us about these things, so that it isn't a sort of a usual suspects consultation, but one talking to people whose voices we don't often hear. Does that sound like something we ought to be thinking about doing in new ways of working, Joe? That would be something for our committee to have a look at and do. Obviously, I'll be going to all the cafes in all the wards, but it may be that somebody will want to do other things.
If I can come in there, I think what we identified was there are a number of poverties. There's fuel poverty, there's food poverty, there's people who aren't connected to the internet at all. It's all poverty. So all those, we identify them as separate, but they're all one really. But we might need to address them separately. I'm reminded of something that, of all people, George Monbiot said, that we need to live in a world of private sufficiency but public luxury. And I think that might be a way of helping, and I hate using this phrase, levelling up, so that we can address the poverty without having to intervene in terms of creating jobs for people and, you know, all the financial implications of that. Those are good things to do, but is it the council's remit, and is it our job as a committee to even think about that? But certainly provision of services, provision of looking at food banks, as it says at the top, or, you know, who visits food banks? Do we want to know their points of view and what they think we can do to help them? Credit unions may be a good way to go, because they're a good way of providing finance in need. So there's a whole load of different things we need to look at there, and I'd like to look at poverty as a whole, because that's what we're looking at in community resilience. Financial poverty, obviously. We're all suffering. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm suffering mental stress from from the COVID situation, and you know how we can help people through that as well. So there's a lot of different things that we could have a go at. We've only got a limited amount of time because the committee, you know, has till March, basically. The other side of this is, just to put Councillor Otten's mind at rest, we have been asked to experiment as a committee to find out what works. Each of the committees, each of the transitional committees has been asked to do things to choose to do things in a different way. But we haven't been told how. We've told just experiment, and then report back to the governance committee and find out what works and what doesn't work. If we do something and it doesn't work, that's just as much of a discovery worthwhile making, because we'll report it back and it won't happen again. Well, that's a theory anyway. So, you know, we aren't being asked to fulfill a particular task. Yes, we are being asked to look at different policy areas, and it would be a good idea to see if we can formulate policy. But if we're doing this, we're doing it from the bottom up, which is, I think, what Councillor Otten was trying to get at, in the sense that we would find the areas that need new policy, and start making those policies and making recommendations based on what we've discovered. So I think this is a way of going forward that I'd like to see us undertaking, but I welcome any comments as well. I'll throw it open.
I was just going to say, Joe, before anybody else comes in, that I did go to a really nice playgroup in Totley Library, and I'll come to that one with you. Okay, it's a promise.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, I completely agree with you about the wonderfulness of Totley Library, and I'll certainly accept that. I do feel that most of the last few minutes' comments have been addressed to me, so maybe I ought to. I ought to respond. I mean, I think it's really interesting that we should think about more proactive policy development, because the scrutiny committees never really did that. They were they were started off as scrutiny committees. They were renamed policy development and scrutiny committees. I didn't particularly notice that the nature of the work changed at all. Developing policy in new and innovative ways. Again, that's very interesting. Potentially very interesting too, isn't it? That we go to playgroups and cafes and talk to people. I mean, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it by all means. I kind of feel like I do some of these things already in other aspects of my life, and poverty is a great thing to choose. I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. You say there's food poverty and fuel poverty and transport poverty. Maybe there's just poverty. Maybe they're all versions of kind of cash poverty, aren't they? But let's look at it from all the angles and see what we can come up with. Yeah, I'm happy to go along with all that.
Councillor Wood?
Can I make one request, Chair? If you're going to set up policy working groups, they're going to need to meet quite frequently. They can't meet on a monthly basis because we haven't got the time to get that work done. And especially in the repairs area, we've got the implementation, all these new systems coming in, and if we don't look at it quickly, it'll be out of date before you get back to discuss it.
Thank you, Councillor Wood, and I think that was one of the comments I made in our little meeting, wasn't it? We will have to have more meetings. Policy working group meetings are real good. Yes. With cake. Yes. Yes. Councillor McGowan, and then...
Yeah, just a couple of things. One's lunch clubs as well as play groups, so there was that one. But the other one is about tying in with the likes, and I don't know about other likes, but I know the South East like that I'm in is doing a lot of work on what are the issues out there, what's important to residents. And so I think instead of, there's going to be a lot coming in from there that we can share instead of trying to do it all.
That's a really good point. We all sit on a lack at some stage. So if there's anything that we feel that the lacks can feed into us or that we can feed into a lack, let us know, because we need to know that. Okay. Councillor Sanger.
Yeah. So sorry, I don't want to be the person who say, oh, it can't be done, it's too much. But
eating cake's too much, is it?
Yeah, well, I eat too much cake. I mean, that's a known fact, and giving me temptation of putting me in more cafes to eat more cakes is probably a bad thing. But yeah, on a more serious note, I mean, from a LAC point of view and a community plan point of view, the first draft of the community plan is due in sort of January, and they've done the evidence gathering, and now it's time to share it with members. And clearly, at the public meetings in February and March, they will be being agreed. So clearly, as Councillor McGowan's rightly said, things are going to come out of that the council is going to need to have a way of implementing that. And some of that's implemented at the LAC, and some of those are going to be citywide thing, which the successor body of this transition committee is going to have to take on. So, if you look at, Peter's list, I mean, historically, the area partnership chairs has been the place where we've looked at loan sharks and credit unions, but it's not the only part of the council. The cabinet member for that service has also been involved in that. So, so I see your list as informing work we do post May. I'm a little concerned that if we've got the community plans to deliver, we've got the new city plan to deliver, and we've got the governance of the council and the budget, including the HRA, all to be delivered by mid-March, expecting members to spend every time between December the 20th and January the 10th in extra cafes and extra, when they could, on the week off, when they're not doing those other things. I'm a little concerned, and I think if we'd had this list in June, I think I would have been much more positive, but I'm just aware that the hardest time to get information from people is the run up to Christmas, because people do lock down a little bit. I think the list we had I'm very keen to go through that and understand which working parties we're going to have, because I agree with Councillor McGowan that we have an opportunity with the youth strategy to get in early and to understand how the youth strategy is going to be different to previous youth strategies. We've clearly got a much thinner service and understanding how it's going to make targeted interventions. But I think all of us as members are concerned about how we build a youth strategy and the role of the youth service. So I would certainly really welcome that working group being up and running as soon as possible and feeding back before the end of this transition committee at the end of March. The same in terms of, I would say we've already talked about cladding and building safety, that there's a piece of work, but that as you say, could come back to, that could come back to the whole of this committee, and that doesn't need to be evidence gathering quite so much. The housing repairs and maintenance, I thought we were going to set up a working group, so I'd be very keen to have a working group of housing repairs and maintenance and a working group on our youth strategy that we could set up today. And if there are elements of the community resilience, if there's a clear piece of work we could do between now and March, but I'm a little concerned that the way it's currently framed, it could be a very large piece of work. I mean, you know, on my time in the council, we've done a lot of work with food banks and a lot of work with credit unions, and clearly there's still quite a lot of poverty in Sheffield. So imagining we can cure poverty between now and mid-March strikes me as a big challenge, and I know the chair and deputy chair are up for big challenges, but maybe we should leave it as a challenge for the next council year.
Because this wasn't, oh my gosh, this is everything we're going to do. This was these are some things. It wasn't a prescriptive list, Andrew, in case you thought all of this had to be done by March. It was trying to make something coherent and look at stuff that is happening. So you've said about housing repairs, that's one bit of that, isn't it? I think when you've said about developing a youth strategy, I'm not quite sure what is happening about the youth strategy itself, but I think what Karen was saying was we want to ask about a strand of it, which is antisocial behaviour and what we can be doing with younger people. And it may be that will look at whether, for instance, digital inclusion, that's the phrase, isn't it, not connectivity. Digital inclusion may be something that we would want to look at about in connection with young people and antisocial behaviour, whether they actually have got places to go where they can, I don't know, play FIFA 21 until it comes out of their ears, if they're my son. Or are we saying that could we get them into allotment and growing things? Would that be, you know, something for some of our younger children? I think it's all up for grabs. It just doesn't all have to be done at once, I promise, Andrew. Although the cake eating is obviously mandatory.
And I'll add to that, what I said earlier on is that we've been asked to experiment. We can't do all of this, it's absolutely impossible. And I'd take that on board completely. But to pick one or two elements out of here and show how we could act as a committee is basically what this document was about. We don't want to do it all. We do want to do it all, but we know we can't. So the idea is to take one or two elements out of it and to see how we can develop those in the way that we feel that might be useful for a future successor committee to be able to do. And I think we have to bear in mind that we're doing, I suppose, two different things. We are trying to act in a policy environment where we're developing policy, but we're also trying to make sure that we're being able to feed into the governance committee what works and what doesn't work as a possible new committee. So I'm quite happy to set up working groups around any of these things, and I think although she isn't here at the moment, 2 seconds. although she isn't here at the moment, Sophie would be a really good person to lead the housing repairs group. So if there's any other working groups that anybody wants to set up after Deborah's spoken, I'll listen to that.
Thank you, Chair. I guess the other thing that I would want to just raise for comments, if possible, is how we use the remaining meetings that we've got as well, because obviously there's quite a lot of stuff from the work programme that's scheduled for the next meeting, but you've also got 3 meetings next year as well, and it could be that you could use some of those meetings. So, for example, one of the things that's on the work programme is the youth strategy, and we've talked about the potential for a working group on that, and the Vice Chair's talked about the potential for doing some work with young people themselves around antisocial behaviour. There's no reason why you can't give over some of your meeting time to some of these things, rather than kind of doing them over and above meetings as well, because we would then be in a situation where you'd be doing working groups and doing other stuff, and then I'd be saying, okay, so what agenda items do you want for your January, February, March meetings? So you could combine the two and maybe give over one of your meetings to, I don't know, just off the top of my head, one of the suggestions around youth strategy, around, you know, you could invite some young people along. I don't know, but you can test out different ways of running the actual meetings themselves, rather than just kind of defaulting to a working group in addition.
Or we could have a meeting run by young people. They could have a takeover meeting, which has been done in other councils.
Councillor McGowan?
I just wonder if it'd be a good idea. I don't know if it'd be best to do it before or after, but to have the youth strategy or the bit around antisocial behaviour, I'd like to see how they work with the youth, and whether that's then something that we do instead of sitting around here. We go out and we actually see them on the ground and see how they work, and that's the bit I'm not quite sure how it all links up. And you know, do they just go out and just have a look around the estates for a group of kids? What do they do if there isn't anybody there? How do they get their intelligence? And then what do they do, and what powers have they got, and how do they break into those groups that there might be resistance to going to youth clubs or whatever? I just want to know how it all works and really understand it. So I think probably having a session out there with them would be really good.
I'm willing to take that on board, certainly.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody got anything, any other area that they'd like us to work on? It doesn't have to come from this list, it could be completely different. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, could I just clarify, would the members be interested then in having, as opposed to one of the meetings next year scheduled, as opposed to having it here in the Town Hall, having a kind of working session with some of the professionals that are working on the front line with the young people? If I can set something of that nature up, would that be something that you'd be interested in? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there might be too many. If we all went out, we're going to look like a big gang, aren't we, going out? It might be that we all go out with different officers at different points of the city and see how it works. That might be some way of working it. You know, might want to get the police involved. It might just be, I don't know whatever they think is the right thing to do, and they know the hot spots in the different points of the city, so.
I think that's a really good idea. Is that possible to set up, Deborah? Fantastic.
Perhaps we could ask Councillor McGowan to liaise with Debbie about some of the things she'd like to see happening in a chairing a working group sort of way.
Cheers, Sinead. Wish I'd not said anything now. Just time commitments, that's my problem. So. Yeah, I'm happy to work with Deborah on it, yeah.
Just something I know we've got their loan sharks, and I'm sort of conscious that in this reduction in universal credit, people coming off furlough post-Christmas is when loan sharks are at their height. So could we, I think that's something I'd like to do, is just coupling that with credit unions, Peter. Would that be 3 strands of work? Is that too many?
I think it's about our limit, to be honest, but I think that would be a really good piece of work, because if we could actually make a difference to some people by pointing out how really dangerous it is to get in with loan sharks and how there are better solutions, then that would be good. And that would actually help us do something positive, which is...
I think all 3 of them are positive.
Yeah, I think they're all positive, yes.
Sorry to keep coming in. I'm just a bit concerned about how few we are tonight, but how few we are anyway as a group to be on 3 working groups or to be on 2, or I'm just worried about stretching people. That's all. So that's my only concern.
I think that's our job to stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, but certainly invite me to all your working group meetings, and I'll be on all 3. That's fine by me. And if it's just the working group chair and me, then that's it. But it might be more than that. I think altogether, is it 10 people on this committee?
And don't forget Sophie, who is an invisible presence today, has also been volunteered to do something. Are you going to tell her, Andrew?
Yes, I'll tell her. I mean, I would say she does give her apologies. So she's at LGA training at the moment, so that's why she's not here today. So she has been sent to do more training by the LGA.
Chair, can I just clarify then?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I know I'm always the one that keeps going. Can I clarify? So we're talking about 3 working groups of potentially different sizes, and you're going to be on all 3, Chair. So are they the youth strategy with Karen, post-Christmas debt strict credit unions with Sinead, and is it Sophie and repairs and maintenance?
3 women.
Thank you.
And sorry, can I just clarify that, Chair? So what the invite's going to go out to all members of this committee to volunteer to be on those, to give those chairs of those working groups some support. So it's just not the Chair and Peter on all of them.
No, I sincerely hope that every one of us will see our way clear to being on one of them. Yes.
Can I be on the one with Sinead, please?
Can I just
That's all
ask,
we got.
you know what I said about the youth strategy and about us going out with the youth service? Are you just expecting that to be the working group then that does that piece of work? Or, because I was thinking the whole committee and not having a meeting one night.
I personally, what I'd like is for every one of us to be able to go out with the professionals. And that 1970s TV programme just came into my mind. But like you say, probably not all in one go, because I still haven't bought a hoodie, so I wouldn't look very good on there. But if we could go in our own areas, so I know there are some that work in Nether Edge, so I'd go out with them, and you'd go out with someone in your area, etc. I think if that could be set up, is that possible? Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. So does that clear that?
In my behalf of Sinead, we've been doing some work with the National Association of Rogue Lenders, and they're basically based in Birmingham Council nationally, but the guy who looks after Yorkshire actually lives in Sheffield, and I'll get you his contact details because he'd be invaluable. He's done a number of projects in Richmond Wood and Woodhouse Wood for me over the last 3 months, and I'll put you in touch with him.
That'll be me and Joe.
Right. Does anyone else have anything else to say on this matter? We've now set up 3 working groups. I hope that isn't overburdening us. I don't think it will be, but I don't think it would be worthwhile trying for 4. So, as far as I can see, we've come to the end of our agenda. So, thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance.
And for electing you.
And for electing me, yes, all the power in my hands now. And the weight of responsibility. So, until next time, well, actually, hopefully we'll meet a long time before that, because we'll have some of these meetings set up for the working groups and for going out and eating cake and meeting young people. Okay, thanks very much indeed.